Right, I think it's started, so we can be able to watch ourselves if you want with another window with some weird inception if you're in both. So this is our second one of these meetings. The first one was just sort of kicking off a bit of a project to try and get the public API shipped. As this is the second meeting, the first thing I wanted to do was ask everybody how they felt the last 2 weeks have gone and what they think of these meetings. And I'm going to ask everyone who's here to volunteer an opinion, and I'm going to go alphabetically from left to right, which means Austin first. If you've got any thoughts, please share them. Don't be shy. Oh, I can't hear you.
Well, that's a good start.
Think I can hear you now? No.
Could hear you a minute ago.
Now your microphone's not working.
Yeah, maybe. I'll tell you what, why don't we move on to David and we'll come back to Austin at the end.
Okay.
Hopefully he finds a voice.
Well, I think the 2 weeks went really quickly, like scarily so. But it's good to have a bit more of a focus for a sprint of work, I think. So I was talking to Kevin about at some point during the week. Just to have a more of a combined attack and knowing what's really going on as the main sort of attack at the time. It's useful. But it's gone too quickly. Maybe we set the bar too high for the first 2 weeks sprint, but it's all good.
I think that's pretty standard. Gabor, got anything?
It went too quickly. I didn't actually do anything, and it was because of other things. But I like these meetings because it gives face time and it humanizes all the other people that work together on tracks. So I think that's important from a community point of view, and also the overarching sets the overarching tone for the next 2 weeks. So keep it going.
Kevin?
Yeah, it's good just have a direction of things. The 2 weeks have gone quicker than I was expecting. And I also kind of get the impression that we were trying to do a lot of stuff in 2 weeks. Which made it quite difficult just to keep track of everything which is going on. Because I was completely stuck in the front end of it, and trying to keep track of all of the changes which were going on in the back end was quite difficult at times. But other than that, having a set focus for the 2 weeks is definitely good.
Awesome. Sebastian?
I can just say the same as everyone before. 2 weeks is quite a short time. If you look at it from the perspective of getting work done, I like having the same target, the same goal for everyone. We might need to get a bit better with what the needed issues are, but aside from that, I like it.
Cool. Austin, did you manage to get your mic working? No. But if you've got something, you can type it in the box and tell us, and then I can read it out if you want. There's a box here and there's Slack. Either one's fine. While you're typing that, I'll sort of wrap up what my thoughts are. So I'm exactly the same. I knew 2 weeks ago when we had this first meeting, I knew we'd overcommitted. But I thought that was a given anyway, because that's what everyone always does the first time they do this sort of thing. You're always going to overcommit and not really have a clear idea of what you can get done in 2 weeks, because it sounds like ages. It sounds like, of course I can get all that stuff done. It's 2 whole weeks. And then you get stuck in and you're like, oh my God, like the first week's gone and I don't know where it went. And so I really wanted to just try it and just sort of get that under our belt and see what benefits we got and what we didn't get, without having to go through all of the really like tricky processes that come with doing Scrum, like actually estimating points and and sort of having a backlog and really getting down and dirty with it straight away, right off the back. I mean, we can introduce those things if we think they're useful, but I wanted to just try what 2 weeks of focus felt like first. Yeah, so that's kind of my thoughts on it, and I'm not sure from here what the best approach is to solving some of those issues. I think we need to keep trying a few times to see how we get on with managing a workload for 2 weeks and what we can commit to or what we can't, and get a better feel for it. But just sort of keep going for a while and keep talking about what we think about it every time as well, in a relatively relaxed format, and again, not going into the real hardcore doing retrospective or anything, and just change it when we figure out what would work better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a couple of like sprints to really kind of realize how short the time 2 weeks is and what you can get done in it, and at the same time plan what's coming up next.
Yeah, but I think if we keep doing it, we'll learn and we'll get a better picture. And if everyone's happy with having an overarching idea of what we're working on and with having a bit to commit to, even if we don't quite manage it for now, then I think we can make more progress like this.
Yeah.
Cool. So with that in mind, we have actually accomplished a great amount of work in the last 2 weeks. We have kicked several features into master and gotten them to a point where we can, think about shipping them, which is fantastic. And I think we've got a few pieces that we need to wrap up and make decisions on. Some of those bits proving to be trickier than we imagined, like the pages stuff. But if we put everything behind the labs checkbox, including the Get helper and the public API helper, that I'm comfortable releasing it, getting some documentation out there and trying to get some feedback whilst we work on it. And I think we're going to need that feedback loop. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to make the really hard decisions. Some of the stuff to do with how the Get helper should work or how the API should work, it's just not. If we haven't got anybody using it, we've got no feedback and no idea whether we're doing the right thing anyway. And Sebastian, you said to me earlier about trying to do a release next week.
Yeah, from my perspective, it is probably ready next week. I mean, there's the pull request to disable the public API. You don't need to use the Get helper if you don't want to, and everything else is working. So get it out, and whoever wants to use it can use it.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I think David was taking a quick look at it. Get the Get helper behind the labs flag as well, just so that people understand that it might break. Because I want to have the ability to say if we don't ship a change to pages in this version, and we decide in the next version that we do want to make that change, I want to be able to make that change without having to worry about deprecation. I don't want to. I want it to be a case of this will break, don't use it in production right now, and just get everyone testing and building their theme ready for when you can use it in production, say in a few weeks' time. The interesting thing that then gives us is the next sprint. We've got some finish-up work to do. If we get a release done next week, then we still have a week of time, potentially, if everyone's around, to do some other work. Now, I know that I'm not around for the full sprint. I am around for, not this week because I'm giving a talk at a conference, and then towards the end of the sprint I would also be at a conference. It's conference season apparently. Let's see if I can. So yeah, the next sprint would end on the, where are we? 7th. On the 10th of November, and I would not be around on the 28th, 29th, not much on the 3rd, the 30th, and also not on the 5th and 6th, I don't think. So there's quite a lot of days when I'm not around. But there's enough time in there to fit in a release and some refactoring work. And we've talked loads about refactoring work in the last week. There's been loads and loads of talk about all of the pain points that we've hit into, areas of the code base which just need a bit of love, a bit of time, a bit of an opportunity to sort of just get ourselves, into a better place where we can move faster in future. And so, with that in mind, I'd like to say that the next sprint would be clean up what we've done so far, finish it up, ship, and then spend any remaining time on refactoring. With a view in mind of dropping that refactoring work if we get instant feedback that needs actioning on instead.
Yep, sounds good to me.
Yeah, like a pretty flexible, slightly lower pressure sprint after the first one, and then maybe we can sort of ramp up to a higher pressure one again with a bigger project again afterwards.
Yeah, because I'm away for the majority of this week from tomorrow through Friday. So I'm at the same conference, and then I'd really like to get the acceptance tests in place, because that just gives me the confidence to work on everything else inside of the Ember. That's what I'd like to focus on.
Cool. Sebastian, you've still got some work to finish up from this sprint.
Yeah, I need to finish the things that are still outstanding. I think that separating pages and posts is postponed for now.
Possibly. I think we just need to figure out exactly what problems we want to solve and how. Maybe just go back to the drawing board and start the discussion over.
I think that the initial idea is the best we have, but I think it needs a bit more work than we anticipated.
Yep. Agreed. I just think we need to be clear about sort of why we want to make the split, and be sure about that split before we do it. And if there's a different solution as well, like maybe there's something else we haven't thought of. So we can go through that. And then, as well as finishing up some of the pieces that I'd like to finish up, which includes some of the refactoring work on front end controller, which I did a really quick job of, that needs doing at some point. In terms of actually finishing pieces up, I'd like to take a look at some of the stuff to do with counts and ordering that is a bit harder, and see if I can come up with a solution for those, bearing in mind that they are also pointing towards refactoring work that needs to be done inside of the API. Again, where things have sort of been glued together as a first botch job and just need to be sort of redone now that we've got a clearer picture of how everything needs to fit together. So I've got a lot of stuff to do with that as well. David, you were looking at the Get Helper Labs flag stuff and also at documentation.
Yep. Well, at the moment I'm just testing all the bits and bobs. It's not all in the same place at the moment, which makes it slightly tricky. But going through, finding out how it's supposed to work. The labs thing, yeah, that's literally just something that you sprung on me about 10 minutes before the meeting. So yeah, I could have a look into that for the Git helper. At the end of the day, you don't want things to be deprecated, but it's still a theme helper which you can take out and adjust, and it's not like something that can terminally break, from what we know at least. So
no, it's not massively.
If there's a massive amount of work to implement, putting it behind labs, if you can't do it the same way, I don't know yet, but if it's that tricky to do, it may not be worth the time, but I haven't got far enough into looking into it yet.
No, that's a fair point. I just want to be able to do, I think it'd just be really good to have one release where it's behind a labs flag, where it's declared beta, where everyone can feedback. We can do a feedback cycle and then take it off.
A quick idea for switching off the Get helper would be to add a flag and test for the Boolean inside of the Get helper and just return an error if it...
Just not register it.
Yeah, or just not register it, something like that.
Yep, I think there's a couple of different places it could be done. I think it can be done. It just gives us that safety and to get some feedback, because despite the fact that pull request has been open for months, we really have had very minimal feedback on whether it's doing what people want it to do. So.
Yeah, at the moment it doesn't. It doesn't at the moment.
Oh.
So.
Thanks for the vote of confidence, David.
It does a lot of good things. It's pretty cool. But yeah, it's just a few finishing pieces really. But that pages thing is a big thing that I can see people wanting to use. People are going to want to be able to fetch their static posts.
Yeah, I think people are going to want to fetch their static pages, and they're going to want to order them by name or something else rather than, I don't even know.
All sorts.
They're going to want to try and do with that. I can see there being cases that we haven't thought about yet. So yeah, I just think give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room, get the feedback, operate on it. Austin, the question about the Ajax helper or the API helper for the next release it's a definite like, if we could get that in, that would be 1,000 times better than not having it. And so if we can get some version of it in behind the labs flag, that would be ideal. I'm tempted to say at the moment, if we include the client ID and the client secret with meta tags, that's kind of how I thought it would be done anyway, because that's how we include other bits of configuration. That's step one, and then step two would be to just provide or include a script via the Ghostfoot helper that does provide a simple method for composing URLs. The reason why it's so important, which I'm not sure if it's is that clear from the issue, is that there are lots of edge cases to do with doing cross-protocol and cross-domain requests, and there are certain cases where the browser will not follow a redirect. So if you don't use the correct URL to start with, it will look like it just doesn't work, when actually it's just a redirect getting in the way, and it's quite hard to debug. So by using a helper to construct the URL from the protocol to the actual domain that's used to the version string, and then adding the client ID and client secret on the end, composing all that for the user, we sort of abstract away all of those tricky things that they might bump up against. So that's why it's like, it's going to make using that 1,000 times easier than not using it. So yeah, there's a thumbs up. Okay, cool. Great. So it'd be brilliant to get that in. And I don't think that we're going to get to the point where we're going to release until the middle to end of next week. But I think we should be able to achieve it in next week. Sebastian, you look very thoughtful.
Yeah, because there's no clear way of doing the helper yet. There are at least 5 ideas in there, but no clear way how to do it.
With regards to which part?
With regards how to include the helper, is the helper a special file, only JavaScript inlined? Yeah.
How to include it? I quite liked your idea of only including it if the front-end client was enabled. And I think the answer to Kevin's question about what happens if you enable it for somewhere else on your blog is that you could just use a different client or create a different client if you were concerned about including.
Yeah. For your blog, you need a different client. Normally, it would be a different client than the front end.
Yep. So you would sort of set up a different client and enable that one, and that one wouldn't get that script injected. It's only the one that's called Ghost Front End that would result in a small script being injected.
And client ID and client secret are going to be included as meta.
Yep.
And anyone who wants to use it on another site needs to copy paste it somehow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think as for whether it's a separate file or inline, if it's easy to inline it. If it's easy to do as a separate file, make it a separate file. It doesn't really matter for the first implementation because we can always change it later, I think. Especially for a first version behind a labs flag, it's just important to have access to a function. I'm more worried about what the function name should be at the moment than whether it's a file or inline. Like, should it be API URL one word, or should it be API.url, or should it be ghost.url.api, because we can have other kinds of URLs. I think there's a whole conversation about naming to be had there, and I hate those because they're always really hard. And yeah, but I think if we get something working, we'll know instantly if it's wrong as soon as people start using it, because they'll start complaining if they don't like it. And I think we're getting less and less feedback on issues, like whilst they're in progress at the moment. And so perhaps catapulting all this stuff out into the theme ecosystem might sort of bring people in a bit more. And it's probably actually worth looking at what the labs flag says and making sure that it tells people to come and give us feedback as well. I'm not sure. I've looked at what the text is yet. Again, that's a text change. We can fix that. Cool.
Yay, it's working.
You got voice, yes.
He's alive.
Surprisingly, it works in Firefox.
Cool. So does that all make sense?
Yeah.
Do you reckon you could have a stab at it?
Yeah, I'll see what I can get done this weekend.
That'd be awesome. That would sort of just give us something to work from, even if it's just a spike. It'd be great to sort of just start playing with it. Cool. So I think we all sort of know what we want to get done in the next 2 weeks. It's going to be a slightly different 2 weeks to the last 2 weeks because we've all got slightly different commitments, at least those of us who are like definitely working full time have all got other commitments in the next 2 weeks. I think Sebastian's got some internal work to do. I've got conferences. Kevin's got conferences. David's got conferences. So it's going to be a different 2 weeks. And so I think having a more relaxed approach does two things. One, it shows that we can do both hardcore, this is a lot of work to do, let's get it done type sprints, and more relaxed sprints, and that we can sort of flex this process a little bit. And two, it sort of gives us a little bit more time to reflect on what happened in the last 2 weeks and think about what we want to do in the 2 weeks afterwards. So I have not got anything else to say. Has anybody else got anything they want to talk about?
Adam and I are working on the testing for different versions of Node.
Yep.
I wrote a script that will set up the Ghost blog and add fake posts and images and stuff. And so we're combining that with his Docker stuff, and we'll see, because I know like a lot of help requests have been around Node or Node 4.0 support. Is that something we'd try to get in, or probably not? But
I'm in two minds at the moment. I'm not entirely, well, I actually was talking to Vadim about this earlier, and we were saying the conclusion we came to was there was a lot of pressure from the community to add support for Node 4. But in terms of Ghost itself, we're not using ES6. We're not using any of the features that come with Node 4. You get a slight performance gain, it looks like, from the testing that's been done, and the garbage collection has slowed down, so you also get slightly worse garbage collection than if you use Node 0.10. So there's not really any benefit to using Node 4 other than it is the latest version and therefore what's automatically installed. And so we're going to get more and more people going, why isn't Ghost working? Because I've just installed Node and they've gotten Node 4 by default. And that's the biggest time sink we're going to have, is that those support requests coming in more and more. And so rushing out support when there's no real benefit seems just like the wrong thing to do.
I mean, is there anything major that's keeping it from Node 4? Other than, because I know there's a SQLite thing, but...
The SQLite thing is all fixed. The only thing is that Express hasn't officially declared support, and so, the major framework that we depend on says we don't officially support it yet, and so us saying we officially support it is slightly silly.
So if we get Express 2, we could theoretically make all of the dependencies support it, but then not officially support it until later on.
Right, I think we could roll out a build. We could roll it out in support and just not say it's recommended, which we wouldn't recommend it anyway. There's a lot of different ways we can approach it. I'm not entirely sure what to do yet. I think the result of the memory testing is going to be the point at which we make the decision on what to do.
Okay.
If there's clearly no memory leaks or no memory issue with Ghost on Node 4, then we can move forward with reasonable confidence.
Cool.
Anyone for anything?
What is the threshold for declaring it safe or unsafe? For the past year, we have said that Ghost consumes about 100 megabytes of RAM.
Yep.
Is this with Node 4 the same, or do we consider 500 megabytes okay, or where do we draw the line?
I think Vadim and I are going to test on, like, basically, because the most popular self-host, I think, would be the DigitalOcean $5 droplet. So we're testing it with both 512 megabytes of RAM and then a gig of RAM to see what it gets on both. And I mean, same too, monitoring its memory usage. So we see kind of, personally, I would think the threshold shouldn't be much higher than it is than it uses normally now.
I think we always want to fit on a $5 DigitalOcean droplet, and if it doesn't, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
But from what I heard, one of the biggest problems we've got is that NPM3 uses something like 3 or 4 times the amount of memory to do an install as NPM1, which means that it almost always will hit those limits, which makes it really tricky because you can run Ghost, but you can't install it.
Yeah, you need to set up swap memory.
Yeah, that's a real, I don't know. The fact that that has happened, I mean, the graphs apparently show that NPM1 was using around 150 megabytes, and now 2 and 3 are using 300-400 megabytes of RAM to just do the install process. And that's only if you're running production install. If you try and do a development install, you're really screwed. Just, yeah.
Especially with all the Emberclease stuff.
Yep. It's tricky.
I'm surprised there's that many support requests about it though, because I think definitely in Rails, if you're doing the asset compilation on the server, that would always trip up the 512 megabyte limit. So you had to have a swap partition set up for that as well.
Yeah, maybe it's just something that people haven't come across in Node. Maybe it's because the user base that we get of people who try and install Ghost for themselves tend to be PHP, WordPress people rather than Ruby people. I don't know. I've added some stuff to the documentation about it. I don't know whether that's going to help at all. I keep adding things to the troubleshooting guide when we hit these sorts of common problems, but I don't know whether people actually find it or not.
Is this something NPM is going to address, or do we have to live with it?
I don't know, honestly. Conversation with Vadim earlier was to perhaps raise it with them and see what they say about it, because I don't think it's manageable to use that much memory. It'll not at least be able to set a cap. But that's just my opinion, and there's no reason why they should take that on board.
I've been running NPM2. Does NPM3 ship with Node 4 by default?
I think so.
Maybe 4.2, because NPM3 was released only 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, something like that.
Oh, okay. Because I know, like, using NVM on my Mac, it doesn't do a 2 or 3.0 install with 4.0. So
that's another thing worth actually mentioning about the Node 4 support is that we are only going to support LTSs of Node, I think. don't really see us doing the version bumps in the middle or supporting it. It's just not something that we've got the time for.
Yeah.
Or really the need to do. I think now that there is an LTS concept, I think it's quite sensible to stick to it.
Yeah.
Is that the version 4.2 is the LTS release?
Yeah. Yeah, the one they just did. So that's the one that we would end up supporting if we added support, or when we add support to Ghost. And when we change our recommendation from Node 0.10, which we are going to have to do in the next 6 months because support ends in March, we will jump from 0.10 probably to 4.2 as being our recommended version. But we need to be more confident about it, and we need to see how that goes in production and all kinds of things like that. So yeah. Anything else?
I'm afraid of the day when we upgrade to 4.
I'm terrified, absolutely terrified.
Just wait until we have to start writing the backend in ES6.
Yeah.
That's a refactoring project that I don't want to do.
We'll see how the Ember-Suave upgrade or refactor on the front end goes, because that will ES6 everything.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I'm sure that will have its benefits as well as its downsides. It's just whether or not we can make a value proposition out of that switch. It's very hard. Like making a value proposition out of switching to Node 4. There just doesn't seem to be one for Ghost. But we are, sort of forced into doing it because everyone else is doing it.
Yeah, I suppose ES6 makes a lot more sense on the front end with Ember-CLI, because it's kind of pushing everything in that direction with ES6 classes and things eventually.
Cool. So, probably wrap this up. Short, quick. If there are refactoring issues that you do intend to do in the next 2 weeks, things that you want to pick up, I do have some. The front end and API stuff. Please, if you can, write an issue, even if it's just an issue addressed to yourself, and assign it to yourself so that there's like a little bit of clarity around what it is you're working on, and we can perhaps dump them into an epic or a milestone, or just keep some rough track of whether we do actually achieve what we want to, so that we can talk about that again next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah. What else was I going to say? All of my tag management UI PRs are finished as far as I can tell. So if anyone has a chance to play with those, then let me know if anything's broken. That would be good.
I did go to check them out earlier actually, but they were all like in Travis in progress, and I was like, oh, he's updating them. I'm not going to touch them until he tells me they're fine.
Yeah, I fixed a couple of issues and rebased everything, which was tricky because they're all dependent on each other.
Yep.
But yeah, that's all sorted.
Cool. Everyone happy?
Yep.
Wrap up? Yeah, lots of nods, thumbs ups. Right, okay, good. Let's end this. Thank you all again, and I will see you in the text chat next week if I don't see you before.
Right, have a good week, everyone.
Yep. Chill.
See ya.